I think there are two types of technology. One is what I call junk tech, a little bit like junk food. So think about a bag of potato chips. We will all have one once in a while, but ideally we don't have it for every meal. The other type of technology is what I call the relational tech. So those that augment our connections with others. Using technology to play with her and to look at, recipes together or things where, games together. It could be online, but the togetherness and the relational aspect that can be enhanced and be very playful with technology, those are the types of opportunities that ideally we are looking for.
I'm Patrick J. McGinnis, and I coined the term FOMO. That's short for fear of missing out, and it's why some people end up following the crowd when they should be blazing a trail of their own. But if you want to achieve greatness in business and life, you've got to break free. Come on, I'll show you how. This is FOMO Sapiens, where we explore how entrepreneurial thinkers find the inspiration and the courage to build exceptional lives.
Welcome back to FOMO Sapiens, the show for entrepreneurial thinkers. I'm your host, Patrick J. McGinnis, and today we're talking to Isabelle Hau, the author of Love to Learn. Now, Isabelle is a visionary leader who is dedicated to transforming the way we nurture and educate our children. As executive director of the Stanford Accelerator for Learning, she leverages brain science and technology to champion innovative, effective, and inclusive learning solutions. As a successful impact investor, Isabelle previously led the U.S. education practice at Omidyar Network and Imaginable Futures, where she invested in mission-driven organizations. Recognized as one of the most 100 innovative women by Harvard Business School, she has also received distinctions in early childhood education and human-centered artificial intelligence. A mother of two, this is my favorite part of all, she has appeared alongside Grover of Sesame Street. Welcome, Isabelle.
Thank you, Patrick, for having me.
It's my pleasure. Okay, so we have a lot to talk about, but before I get into any of that stuff, there's a question I have to ask you, which I ask all my guests, and the question is this. Tell me something unexpected you learned about yourself that changed everything.
Yeah, thank you for this beautiful question, Patrick, because actually this is very connected to the book. So when I was very young, I was late at everything. I was a late walker, late talker. And so at around age 3, my parents had me take one of those psychological tests. And when it came back, it essentially said that I had low academic aptitude.
Wow.
Not the type of results that any parent wants ever to receive, of course. Anyway, they remained largely undeterred, showered me with a lot of love, and then enrolled me into a beautiful childcare facility that really changed my trajectory. I would end up becoming a valedictorian of my high school. I would end up graduating from Harvard University. So all this low academic aptitude is well behind me. But I have reflected a lot on why and really this early childhood education, high quality early childhood education that I received, I think made a huge difference and really was transformative for me. So thank you for this beautiful question because it's deeply connected on why I wrote this book, Love to Learn.
I love it. And just everybody, so I know Isabelle because we were at school together, at Harvard together. Isabelle, I was really great at school as a little kid, just so you know. So,
You're always great at school. Yeah.
I was not valedictorian, I'll tell you that. But we knew each other there. And I got this book in the mail and I read it. And, what I love about this book is that this is a show for entrepreneurial thinkers. And part of being an entrepreneurial thinker is also thinking about whether you're a parent or you're dealing with children or you're just trying to learn about yourself. Understanding how to learn and how children learn is a really important part of operating in this world. So we're going to get into this cutting edge thinking. And I really want to start with this big topic that you bring up, which I was not familiar with, which is this notion of relational intelligence, which you're going to explain to us because, I know IQ, I know EQ, all that sort of stuff. Relational intelligence, RQ, new to me. First of all, where did that come from and what does it mean?
So it's new to a lot of people because it's a new concept that I'm introducing.
Oh, so it's yours. It's
Well,
your FOMO.
I'm
Boom.
not coining the term. Others have used it, but it's not where it could be, in my opinion. So you're absolutely right, Patrick. Most of us are very familiar with IQ. So this notion of measuring human intelligence through a cognitive lens, essentially. And then emotional intelligence has made its appearance more in the past 20 years or so, very, very common now in many workplaces. What I would love to see happen is a new concept alongside maybe IQ, but certainly EQ, which is what I called relational intelligence. So the ability to simply connect and relate to others. Why? Because our brains are social. And so the more we connect and relate to others, the larger our brains become. And this has been proven over and over again by many researchers. There is a big body of the science of relationships. And certainly in the early years, but throughout life, that shows that if we have strong connections and relationships in life, we are actually doing better, living longer, and having, thriving more in life overall. And certainly from an academic outcome and brain development, that we have larger brains and brains that are more active if we have nurturing relationships from the start of life.
Yeah, I always think of, as you were talking, I was thinking about, the famous Grant study that was done over at Harvard, which basically there was a longitudinal study which studied people over the range of their life across in different sort of socioeconomic circumstances. And it found that people who had the most successful lives were the ones who had the strongest human connection. So I guess, if we start early on that sets us up for success. Now, you talk about this notion of a relational deprivation crisis. And I was just, it's like we can see that the relational sort of connections between us are fraying as adults. We can see it all over the place, social media and all the other places. But talk about this in the context of the work that you're doing and what you've written about.
Yeah. So you're right. There's a lot of press on the isolation of adults. I think there is less on children from a discourse perspective. So that's why I think it was very, very important to write it and to write this book and point to not only the importance of the early years, but also how we can address it. So what's happening right now is a multiple set. I mean, there are three main ones that I can speak to, but there are probably more than three. But the top three are simply that families are getting smaller.
Okay.
So, birth rate is at a low point in the US and in a lot of countries. So in concrete terms, that means that there are less and less children per family unit. So there are less and less siblings to play with. So, for example, 1 in 5 children is now a lonely child in families, which is a very, very high increase relative to even a few years ago. Grandparents also tend to live further away. We have a society where we are living, further and further away from grandparents or grand adults. Yeah. One stat that I give in the book, which actually was really surprising to me, is only 3% of children have ever met an adult above age 65 who is not their grandparent. Wow. Unbelievable. Yes, we have a very age-separated society. The second factor is very simple to understand as well, is that kids are playing less. So they are more and more overscheduled with a lot of activities. There's a lot of increasing in fear also about the safety of play. Lots of different factors, but play is going down. And so as a result, little ones have less friends. So they have less people in their family units, they have less friends, but it's to the point that 1 in 5 parents is worried that their child has no friends or very few friends at this point, based on a very recent survey. So it's concerning, yeah. And then the third factor is technology. And technology can be a force for good. It can be, it has a lot of benefits too. But when, the latest stat on, which I find really interesting, is every single adult at this point is checking their phone 200 times. Actually, the exact number is 204 times a day. And I can see it in my own little, circle. It feels right. We are checking our phones very often. In concrete terms, what it means from a relational standpoint is that there are 200 opportunities to break a relationship with a child if you are interrupted with a phone call or a text message or a social media notification. So those are, opportunities to disrupt a potential healthy relationship with a child.
Yeah, and also we're modeling that behavior, right?
Absolutely.
Because if you're on that phone all day, then Junior sees it. How new is this? I mean, I understand technology that, let's think about the first smartphone. I think it was 2010 when the iPhone came out, the really good phone. So that's 15 years. The grandparent thing is a demographic shift over the last, say, 20, 30 years. Same with the thing around sort of single, sort of only children. So this is really, though, if we think about it, this is a phenomenon that probably started 20, 30 years ago. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Certainly well before the pandemic. So pandemic obviously added to the situation because families were even more isolated and children were more, even more isolated in many cases from school, from other friends. So it only added to the situation, but certainly a concern that started well before.
FOMO. And I can think of a lot of kids I know who are living in those three circumstances. I live in New York City. You have a lot of single, sort of only children whose parents moved away from wherever the heck they're from, and technology is ubiquitous, right? So what is the implication for that child? What is different about them than they would have been had they grown up in sort of the opposite circumstances?
So what the science says very clearly is that a child needs at least one loving and nurturing adult relationship to thrive.
Yeah.
So they don't need, a lot of them. So a single child with a loving, even if it's a one-parent situation, has a lot of opportunities to thrive. It's better to have more relationships built in. Just, parent may be busy, parent may be occupied, parent may need to work. All these things, what the data say, and the data are for high schoolers, they are not for younger children, but I think they would apply if we had data for younger children, which we don't. The more strong relationship a high schooler has, the better they are from an academic and social emotional outcome basis at school.
Okay, so
And they seem to be, and it seems to be like almost like a correlation between the two. So those data do not exist for younger children, but many scientists have looked at least one adult relationship matters a lot and can make a huge difference in someone's life, as evidenced, for example, by the Harvard study that you referred to, Patrick, but other studies too. But the recommendation is to have at least 3 or a minimum of 3, so that there is a little bit of an edge between those different adults around that child. And often it's a teacher. So in my case, this was a teacher, an early childhood teacher, but it could be a coach, it could be a faith leader, it could be it could be a number, or it could be a friend of the family. Many.
Who it's not, Isabelle? It's not ChatGPT. It's not character AI.
It's not character AI.
No, it is not. I mean, but let's talk about technology because I think, like, I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, first of all, I'm feeling guilty because, like, when I hang out with my niece, I get a little bored sometimes. Love her, but like at some point you're like, we're making fake food right now. I just want to check my Instagram, and now I won't do that. But like, what can anybody who's spending time with children, who's hearing this and saying like, okay, I want to, first of all, be mindful of how I use technology, but how also, like, my kid's in school with an iPad all day, and my kid is probably coming home and playing with a computer and a video game all. He says, like, how can we how can we think about technology and integrating it in a way that gives us those benefits while mitigating against those really pernicious aspects?
Yeah. So I love technology myself. This is where I've spent my entire career thinking about the positive impact of leveraging technology in education and in other sectors. So I'm definitely on the not saying that we should not use technology, or that it would be totally unrealistic to think that we can eliminate technology from our lives. However, the way I think about technology in family units is very simple. I think there are two types of technology. One is what I call junk tech, a little bit like junk food.
Uh-huh.
So
Young tech.
junk
My
tech.
favorite type, but keep going.
Yeah, so think about a bag of potato chips. It's okay, we can have it. We will all have one once in a while,
Yeah.
but ideally, we don't have it for every meal. We don't have it at breakfast. We don't have it, at every meal. Otherwise, it's probably not healthy for us. Okay. The other type of technology is what I call the relational tech. So those that augment our connections with others. So in your example with your niece, Patrick, what would be ideal is using technology to play with her and to look at, recipes together, or things where, games together. It could be online, but the togetherness and the relational aspect that can be enhanced and be very playful with technology, those are the types of opportunities that ideally we are looking for. But certainly not having too much junk tech, it would be ideal. Here is where it's tricky for all of us, is that we don't have tools that are easy to use as parents or as consumers to distinguish between junk tech and relational tech. So we have some, there is like Common Sense Media, for example, has some ratings on certain apps for children and does a fabulous job at it. But they are not integrated, or ideally these recommendations would be integrated in app stores, for example, or other ways where we are sourcing the technology that are easy to use, like what is happening in the food industry, where it's very easy for any one of us to say, when I eat this type of food, it has these types of ingredients, and I know how much sugar content there is, or how much trans fat there is, or all these things that you should ideally reduce. Yeah.
It is. Do you think if I train my niece to post on Instagram for me, that would be junk tech or relational tech? I think I know the answer.
Do it together.
I want to do it together. There we go. I think that's a good idea. I want to talk a little bit about, as you know, one thing that you talk about that I thought was interesting is scheduling and having kids in a million things. And you see this especially in affluent communities. You live in the suburbs of San Francisco. I live in New York City, and kids, like when I was a kid, I'm sure your experience growing up in France was the same. Like, you know what I did on Saturday? Nothing. Like literally, we go outside, maybe we watch TV. That was kind of it. Maybe we did a sport. Nowadays, you see kids who are like, they're in like third grade. They have Mandarin classes. They're learning to fence. They're like, it's all this stuff. There's Never Enough, that book by Jennifer Wallace, Brahini Wallace, kind of gets into that. And I understand the temptation, right? But and I think there's probably some RQ or relational intelligence from being in these group activities with other kids, which is positive. But there is this overload that happens. How can parents, avoid that FOMO of putting their kid into like 1,000 different things? Like, how does one think about this so that you're giving your kid exposure, but not to the point where it's actually detrimental?
It is very tricky, Patrick, because all of us is driven by this rat race to college.
Yeah.
Because colleges are looking at extracurricular activities, and that's one way of differentiating, or perceived as one of the differentiation from parents. So that rat race is starting, earlier and earlier. So those scheduled activities are starting very young. I mean, these little soccer tots or these little, music classes for very young age groups.
Yeah, you like have a baby, you can't move, and all of a sudden they're in like jujitsu classes.
Yeah. By the way, you mentioned this is affluent families, absolutely, but there's a lot of research on this. It has trickled down. So this phenomenon is also now certainly middle class and it's pretty widespread, I would say, at this point. And so the counter to this is very simple but but it needs to be understood very clearly, which is that free play is critical for any child to thrive and learn and make friends. And having, for example, a strong friend in kindergarten is one of the greatest predictors of academic and long-term success. So we know what drives brain size, we know what drives academic performance, but when you have this other path, which is this like a race to college that gets in the way, trying to balance the two as a parent, I think is really important, ensuring that kids have this time to play so that their brains and ability to be resilient, ability to be creative, ability to simply thrive will come from those very special free play moments, much, much more than a child who is overscheduled. Actually, there's some recent research on this. You're exactly right to call it an overload. There's a point at which academic performance starts materializing as we would expect. Actually, it's not surprising, but some researchers have demonstrated that.
FOMO. So you've kind of highlighted this importance of play and free play as part of the package of things. If we were to just think about, kind of step back and say, I want to raise a kid who loves to learn, what else? Because like at the end of the day, if the kid loves to learn, kind of the battle is over. You've kind of achieved, even if they're not the greatest student, even if they don't go to the Ivy League school, like a love of learning will get you through much of life. So what would be your number one piece of advice to parents to cultivate that?
And I think this gets back to just a conversation we just had. I think play is critical for any child to thrive. Play has so many benefits. Actually, kids who play more have even better academic outcomes. So all of this needs to be said and repeated because play is so many social, emotional.
Hide and seek.
Yes, hide and seek. Exactly. And ideally in connection with others, because we learn with and from others. All animals, actually, by the way, do. When little ones have conflicts with others, this is how we learn. When they play and have fun and joy with others, this is how we learn as humans. This is a critical attribute for all of us to succeed in a workplace. If you want to be an entrepreneur, I would recommend a lot of play.
Life, if you have a sense of play, this is like a thing that I think we forget. And you always hear like these adults who go to like Burning Man. They're like, I found my sense of play, which is fine. Like if that's what it takes for you to do that, then you book your flight. But it's like, if you can get up in the morning with a sense of like, this is fun and I'm going to make it fun, come hell or high water, and I'm going to be curious, you're never going to be bored. Never.
Exactly. No, and for example, when I think about your audience as entrepreneurs, so obviously entrepreneurship requires a lot of autonomy and resilience, but also creativity. All of those are tied to play. Creativity, for example, is the more you play, the more creative you are.
Yeah, and that doesn't have to go away. It's such a good point. Speaking of. Before we go to the lightning round, I have one last question, and you teed it up perfectly, which is entrepreneurs. We have entrepreneurs listening to the show who are thinking about perhaps the future of education. Education, huge industry, lot of change. Obviously, we have AI and all this other stuff. Like, if you are giving advice to an entrepreneur who wanted to be in the education space, like what would you tell them to focus on?
So I would first say that this is exactly the right time. We are at an unprecedented time for literally a revolution in learning. And let me speak about why for four very, very clear things that are happening in education right now. One is that for the first time ever, we have actually data, so we can personalize learning to the needs of every child, of every educator. Two, we have new sciences. So 90% of the modern brain science has emerged over the past 20 years. So we have incredible new sciences that have emerged. Three, we have new technologies, and you mentioned AI, of course. But for example, at Stanford, our largest student club is quantum in engineering. So AI, yes, but there are also other technologies that are coming that are also really important and may impact the way we learn and the way we educate. And then the four big trend that is really interesting is new needs. So right now, if we don't do anything, but I think there's an opportunity for innovation there. There is a gap between how we are educating our children in schools and what they need in a workforce. And especially with AI, that gap is widening. So there is an opportunity for innovation. So those four things, I think this is a right time to come in. People are looking for new ideas, and this is a great time to be an entrepreneur in education.
All right, entrepreneurs, you heard it here first. And now, are you ready for lightning round?
Yes.
All right, here we go. Question number 1. What's a favorite quote?
Favorite quote is, "Be the change you wish to see."
Favorite use case for ChatGPT?
GPT or Gen AI more broadly, because I have one love.
Either one.
Okay. One that I love, it's a Stanford project. This is by far my favorite project. It's called Google Glasses. And this is for kids on the autism spectrum. When they wear those glasses, it's equipped with some computer vision technology that analyze, different images that are being processed. What it does is, for the first time, a child is able to detect and recognize the emotion from the other person across from them. So it's unbelievable from a human connection perspective. So it's a beautiful example of where technology can actually augment, connections, especially for kids who are typically struggling with doing so.
Wow, that's incredible. And what about ChatGPT?
ChatGPT, at a personal level, just using it so much that just like I feel like it's my my research assistant and writing assistant. Writing assistant would probably be a good description. For me, as a non-English native, it's such a helpful level setting tool because it helps me perfect my English.
Yeah, je l'utilise pour écrire en français.
Yeah, exactly. You can also translate.
Like when you write or speak to it in the language, a foreign language, it answers you right back in that language, right? It's great for language learning.
It is great for language learning, and it's also great for all of us who are multilingual learners or at different, because you can check your language in your grammar and in any language, which is very nice. Your accents, in fact.
A good one that people don't realize. So that's a value.
By the way, Patrick, this is a huge opportunity for innovation in education because a lot of classrooms have multilingual learners, whether they are immigrants or whether they are just multilingual learners in that community, and it's impossible for any educator to speak multiple languages that are present in that classroom. So there is a huge opportunity in my mind for innovation on multilingualism with those tools. It may not be ChatGPT, but one of the other tools. Yeah.
It's so fast. Like we've just never had that before, right?
Exactly.
And that's a really amazing use case. Number 3, what is a piece of advice you give to your younger self?
Piece of advice is very simple: is be proud to be different.
I like that. It's true.
I wish I had known this earlier.
You know what? I think that's the project of life, is to accept who you are and thrive.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like you can't, it's just like, ugh. But that's like, you kind of have to go through those years of wanting to be everybody else first.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, last one. What's your most important memory? And if it's about me when we were classmates, feel free to say it.
So many of them come through. Certainly having children being one of them. That's probably a highlight as a memory, and reminded that we all have so many identities, but being a parent is one that trumps all other ones.
Yeah, and when your mom writes a book about education, that means that you love learning no matter what. So, and she never plays with her phone. She's perfect.
Exactly. Thank you for saying that, Patrick.
All right, the book is called Love to Learn. If you want to learn more about Isabelle and her work, you can find her. She's very active on LinkedIn at Isabelle Hau, H-A-U. You can find her on her website, isabellehau.com. And she does use X, formerly known as Twitter. And this is fun. It's at VOLCOUCOU, Volcucu. Isabelle Hau, author of Love to Learn. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Patrick. I so enjoyed that conversation.
FOMO Sapiens is recorded in New York City and can be found on YouTube at FOMO Sapiens or on your favorite podcast network. Theme music is by Mike McGinnis, editing and post-production is by Josh Elstro, and the show is produced by Matt Curtis and me. If you like today's show, please be sure to rate it and share it with your friends. And as always, you can find more about the show and me at FOMOSapiens.com and PatrickMcGinnis.com.